Welcome to Commonwealth Works, where today we're going to discuss what are rights. What rights are a variety of things to a variety of people, but we're going to discuss where the different philosophical sources of those rights are. But fundamentally, what we're talking about for rights are things that you're entitled to do and things that you're entitled to. So things that society is required to provision for you and things that society cannot prevent you from doing. So first off, we're going to talk about natural rights theory. This is the theory that rights come from the inherent nature of human beings as we exist in the world. This means that these are either evolved or built-in traits of humanity, and to violate these is to violate nature. The key thinkers are Locke, Hobbes, and it goes back to Aquinas as well. Life, liberty, and property are undeniable. So this is the big rights that you hear about in like the U.S. Bill of Rights and the U.S. Declaration of Independence. So you cannot be killed, you cannot be injured, you have to have freedom of movement. Unless you're violating someone else's rights, you can do most things that you would desire to do. And you have a right to the property that you earn from your labor. And those rights are undeniable, is the central thrust of natural rights theory. Next off, we have legal positivism, which is a theory of rights that rights are derived from the state, and that could mean that they're democratically derived, meaning that people decide what their rights are. Not necessarily linked to morality. It just means that you're obligated to what society has decided you're obligated to. So this is very different than than some of the other theories here. Historical traditional rights is a little different than legal positivism because your rights under legal positivism are just declared your rights by the state. Under historical traditional, your rights arise out of customs and practices over an evolved, lived experience. So this means that historical traditional rights do change over time, but they don't change via fiat. They generally would change when there's been a conflict of rights in the past, and this has led to social conflict. Then society evolves new norms that make sure the rights of individuals are not in conflict going forward, and then those become your traditions. Next off, a few more other sources of rights would be the social contract theory. This is the theory that our the way that we interact with each other is a contract between the state and the citizen, and um, over time that contract changes, but initially the people give up their unlimited freedom that they would have in the state of nature to the state, and then the state determines what amount of freedom they have after that's over. This kind of ties into some of the other theories like the traditionalist theory, as well as the natural rights theory to some extent. Some of the same thinkers like and Locke are involved in this as well, that just like they were under the natural rights model. So this is how this ties in with natural rights would be your natural rights are unlimited. Then the social contract, through the social contract, you give the state some of your rights in order to gain certain privileges. So under the state of nature, you're allowed to do whatever you want, unlimited. You can murder people, you can do whatever you want. But in order to make sure you don't get murdered, you gave up your right to murder to the state. And that's an example of the social contract. So the social contract is you give some rights to society, and then in turn, some of your rights are guaranteed. So you get more positive rights, which is a guaranteed right, versus but you're losing some of your negative rights or your rights to do whatever you want. Another thing, social contract is very central to ideas like constitutions. And the U.S. Constitution is very central to that social contract idea. Utilitarianism is that society and the state. So the state and society, I have been using them kind of interchangeably. They don't necessarily mean the exact same thing. So the state is the thing that has the monopoly on violence and gives laws. Society includes things that go beyond the state entity. But under utilitarianism, rights are justified as the things that will produce the maximum amount of utility. Utility is kind of a fancy word for contentment or happiness. So whatever will create the maximum amount of contentment and happiness across society is what we want to do. And so society will try to scientifically endeavor to create the exact set of rights and privileges that promote the most welfare, happiness, joy, etc. Marxists believe that the class relations determine rights, and those class relations uh, are basically the most powerful people will give themselves the most privileges, and the weak people will have the least privileges. So rights are just come from class, and their goal would be to eliminate class to maximize freedom because people who are not in the higher classes have very little freedom under the standard capitalist system. So we've got these different ideas here of some of these other ideas of sources of rights. Most of the frameworks that we've discussed so far emphasize very similar sets of sources of rights. Uh, Mostly claims, entitlements, and protections. So things that you're allowed to do, things that you're protected from, things that you are obligated to receive. Duties are not generally part of these frameworks. This is something very important to the subsidiary framework of rights that we're going to talk about for most of the rest of this presentation. So duties under these frameworks are legal requirements. They're contractual. So if you fail to live up to your duties, you can be sued. Um, and they're instruments for achieving social goals. So you're required to do them. So society achieve something. Not They're not treated as moral obligations. You don't have to if you fail to live up to your contract obligations. That is a moral failing, but it's not held in the same regard as if you fail to live up to your true moral duties. So some of the duties that we might be referring to would be a duty to your family to provide for them. If you fail to live up to that duty, that is a moral failure. Um, as well. Now, it's a moral failure if it is possible for you to live up to it. It's not a moral failure if it's impossible, but if it is possible, it's a moral failure. So you're required to do that. You have a duty to do that. Rights without duties are just a set of obligations the state has to you. They're conditional, revocable, and dependent on institutions or conditional outcomes. Moral responsibility comes secondary to enforcement, without duties being central to the idea of rights. Human rights come from God and human dignity under subsidiarity framework. They're objective, universal, and unalienable. They also align with the natural law. They're derived from an individual's duties to their subsidiary levels of duty. So the primary duty of individuals is to their family, then their community, then their nation, and then their people. Ultimately, their duties are to the church, but many are not aware of those duties or haven't submitted themselves to those duties or that discipline. A big thing here is because everything comes from God, that's what makes it universal, unalienable, objective, and that's why it aligns with the natural law. God created the universe, therefore his law is derivable from natural law. And a big thing here with these ideas, though, it means you don't have to be a Christian to derive these ideas. These can be driven from first principles using the arguments for God and the nature of God that's available to all humans. So it does not require special revelation to have these beliefs about rights. It just needs knowledge that can be derived from natural processes like the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of a God can then be used to derive additional features about that God and about man's relationship to that God. So these are not these ideas to subscribe to or have these ideas. You don't have to be a Catholic or a Catholic thinker or even a Christian to come to these ideas. They're available from anyone who believes in a creator can come to these ideas. A big thing here, though, is that all these ideas are mutually reinforcing, and they come back to the idea that God created a man with dignity, God created man with duties, and those are universal truths, and those are natural to man because of natural law. So that's all these things are reinforcing. They're all part of a framework, an interconnected framework. These aren't just like unconnected ideas. Under subsidiarity, uh, natural rights are directly part of the theory of rights. They're directly related concepts, and they're completely compatible. So there's nothing like natural rights and subsidiarity are completely compatible. So under legal positivism, the state creates the laws. Under subsidiarity, God created the rights. So the thing here is the state still has a significant role to play under subsidiarity in guaranteeing and ensuring uh, individuals can express their rights and live up to their duties. So this isn't they're completely at odds, but the grounding is very much they're very much against each other. This is the first one of our theories where we have strong disagreement between subsidiarity and the other moral theory. Under social contract theory, the rights are negotiated and they're between both sides. Under subsidiarity, God created the rights fundamentally, and they're fundamentally natural to the world. There's no role in contract in the creation of the rights. Now, there is some role for the means by which the state ensures rights that the contract can exist, but those rights exist with or without a social contract. So under subsidiarity, dignity is central versus under utilitarianism, welfare is central. So these are very different ideas. So if you cannot live up to your duty, then that violates your dignity. Under utilitarianism, the idea that's central is just having that maximum level of contentment and joy. Under Marxism, rights are ideological. They're created by the powerful in order to perpetuate their power and privilege and status. Under subsidiarity, rights are created by God to ensure human dignity and ensure that people can live out God's plan for them. In conclusion, subsidiarity's view of rights in regards to duties protects dignity, limits overreach, and strengthens communities. It's the best framework because it incorporates God's plan for the world as well as incorporating natural rights that are easily ascertained from people's observations of the world.